Welcome. Glad you were able to join us for the Ghent Workgroup PDF for Packaging, the Missing Link webinar. My name's Dave Zwang. I happen to be the chairman of the Ghent Workgroup, in addition to representing the printing industries of America in the U.S. For those of you who are not aware of the Ghent Workgroup or what we do, we're an international association that of industry experts that works really hard to develop best practices, educational information, to help promote efficiencies, optimization, and standardization in graphic arts around the to be used around the globe. So if you're not that familiar, at the end of the presentation there'll be some other information, and of course you can get all the information you could possibly ever need by going to our website at gwg.org. And if it's not there, just contact us through the website, and we'll make sure you get the information you need. So with that, let's get started. I guess that the title, of course, PDF for Packaging, the Missing Link, is kind of an interesting one for many of you. For those of you who've been around for a while, gray hairs, as I've been called, I guess. PDF is a file format that actually changed the way we do business in publishing and document production many years ago, starting back in the 90s, I guess. Prior to that, there was a lot of proprietary technology. Still be able to electronically produce catalogs and newspapers and magazines and marketing documents, etc. But PDF actually allowed us to move to the next level, and we're kind of at the cusp of a major shift as it relates to packaging in that same vein. And here we go. So back in the 90s, there were a lot of things going on in terms of digitization around document production. And as I said, document production could be anything. Could have been, at that time, magazines, newspapers, marketing, communications, documents, etc. And there was this change, if you will, from copiers to digital printers back in the early 90s. And digital printers actually became production ready, if you will, kind of mid-90s. So instead of just being able to stick a piece of paper on a copier, print it out, and make copies, you're actually able to send files directly from your computer to what was a digital copier, but then became a digital printer. Things started to change and move a lot faster around 1996. That's when PDF 1.2 kind of Acrobat, released as part of Acrobat 3, came out, because it actually added color and a number of other features and functions to the format that actually drove more digital publication and more digital printing, if you will, to what were digital printers. And then the digital printers started to grow, and it kind of fed off of itself. So digital printing grew. In 2006. Digital printing was 35% of total print output. And at that point, 7% of the printers had digital print. So it started moving rather quickly over this 10-year period. And you can actually see some of the shifts from 2004 to, in this case, 2014 in that graph down there. Another thing that happened as a result of that change was that processes and roles changed. Prepress, which used to be a standalone business, and there were a lot of them, as a matter of fact, was kind of the process itself was actually split between the designers upstream and the printers downstream. And as a result, Prepress businesses, for the most part, eventually pretty much disappeared as a standalone business, and a lot of that could be attributed, as I said, to the PDF format, because prior to that, prepress businesses needed to support the prepress functionality, especially even digital prepress functionality, because the cost of the equipment, prepress equipment, to deal with digital development and digital prepress was in the millions of dollars. It's, the site tech systems and the health systems and many of the other digital what we called SEP systems back there. Were expensive to get into. But once we got into something that was more standardized, like the PDF format, there was a lot more development in terms of the ability to take those PDF files and do something with them in a relatively lower, well, in any case, a lower cost production method. So as a result, we were able to get more people going between designers and printers, et cetera. And in addition to that, because we were able to get more people involved in producing software and systems to work with PDF in this arena, automation was starting to become more of a part of the process itself. And actually, by doing that, what happens is we were able to reduce the skill sets even that were required to do a lot of the prepress work. So again, a lot of this all around some standardization. So some prepress companies, in order to survive, added design and development services. Some printing companies added marketing and other services to add value to print. And this continues even today. Why is PDF so successful? Well, first of all, it's a standard exchange format. But it's more than that. It's actually a container for content. It's object oriented, which means that the content that exists within a PDF file actually can individually stand on its own, and we'll see some of that later. And that again adds to a whole host of other ways to leverage content and moving that content, transporting that content for further processing down the line, and ultimately some kind of printing. It's widely supported. It's somewhat ubiquitous at this point. Easy to transfer. It's easy to work with. In the case of print, if you're using one of the PDFX formats, whether it's preferably PDFX4, and actually even more preferably PDFX4 Plus, which is really the more tailored version that the Ghent Workgroup has developed best practices around. You can actually it was developed for blind exchange, so you can actually take this format and you can move it. And ultimately, what this also did is it maintained divisions of responsibility between designers and production people, and that was also a very good thing in terms of being able to turn things quicker, more reliably, etc. And it's been working for commercial digital print, as I said, for now for probably 20 years or more. Since as I said, since probably full bore since around 2006, and maybe even a little earlier. So then the real question became, and at the Ghent work we were talking about this. We said, okay, well, if it can work so well for digital print, can it work for digital packaging production? Why can't we use PDF for digital packaging production? So back in around 2003, I shouldn't say we. As I mentioned before, the Ghent Workgroup is made up of a number of experts from around the world. Experts and beyond just experts, actually people who are involved in the industry who actually use PDF for production on a daily basis. And a number of them said, you know what, let's sit down and talk about it. So there was a meeting held in Munich, actually. And what they determined at that point in 2003, was, first of all, PDF files don't necessarily, as it relates to packaging anyway, don't necessarily represent the final file as it's printed. PDF, it was mostly used as a kind of a soft proofing, but really more than anything, just a kind of a content proofing tool. it really couldn't be used without proper integration from production software. And again, in packaging, like it was in commercial print in the past, packaging requires certain tools, specialized tools, and they were very expensive. And even today, there are a lot of if you go into a converter or a packaging prepress house, and there are still packaging prepress companies that exist. They're using very proprietary types of tools made by a number of companies in the industry that specialize in tool sets that actually allow you to prepare files for packaging production. But what we were trying to accomplish, or what we, just like we did with commercial print, is we wanted to get a standard one version of the truth PDF that could be reviewed, used for soft proofing, used by marketing people, and ultimately converters as well. So we wanted to have one, because right now what was happening, or back then and even today, what would happen is there'd be a number of these PDFs that would in theory the same package that would go to back to the consumer product company, that would go for review, that would be sent to their within their organization, to marketing, legal, design, etc. And then that same file, or a copy of that file, would go to the converters of the prepress houses. And there are a lot of these files going around, and then they would so everybody would have comments. It would come back in, it would be cycled back around again, go out again, and it created a kind of a mess to try to organize and keep together. But more importantly, it actually also extended the time to turn these things around. And in today's market, and as a matter of fact, even back then, if I'm a consumer product company, the faster I can get a new product to market, the more money I can make. I get it on the shelf, it can be sold. If I'm just talking about what it's going to look like for months on end, I'm not going to be able to make any money on that, not in the short term. So ultimately, the delivery of a PDF is only useful if all the information is stored in the PDF file, and PDF in its more current form allows for kind of an XML structure to store some of that, and we'll talk more about that in a little while. But the goal that we were looking for was a PDF that'll support the process from design to prepress to the converter, because if we have that, then we can move things a lot faster, and we can begin to automate things, just as we did in commercial print. So, back in the Ghent Workgroup was founded back in 2002 for best practices, so based on that meeting, we started actually discussing and working on, in parallel to our work on some of the other types of applications like newspaper, magazine, etc. We started working on packaging. We engaged a number of brand owners in Europe, in the EU, and in the US. We brought together leading packaging prepress and converters, and we talked about this, and we tried to define ways to make this happen, to see what we needed to do to be able to make this happen, and be able to use a standardized PDF instead of more proprietary workflows, so that they can be sent to just about any converter with ideally with much more limited skill sets, et cetera, just as we did within the commercial print arena. So we actually created early on in 2004 our first design to prepress, which kind of best practice, which kind of allowed people to begin to understand what they can do and kind of begin to get their toe dipped in the water, if you will, on using PDF in the production process, but more importantly, in the front end of the production process, in the design, going from between design and prepress. But we realized that as we were doing this, that there were certain core issues, both in PDFX and PDF, more importantly, that were going to have to be addressed in order for us to be able to reach kind of the holy grail, if you will. Some of those of using PDF for everything, for the whole process, I should say. So, what were some of the limitations we found as we started really digging into this? Well, we found that, for example, we needed better color support. PDF at the time supported RGB, CMYK, and name colors like Pantone colors. But that wasn't going to be enough. We needed to really get more involved in spectral colors, because while Pantone colors gives us a certain range, some brands actually like to select their own color or develop their own color. And ideally, the way to deal with that and communicate that information is at the core way to communicate color, of course, in spectral values. Um, Additionally, we found that there was a need for extensive media and print support, technology support. For example, um, we want to be able to print with and on white, metallics, different types of media, plastics, etc. That would actually be very difficult at the time to begin to present and view in a PDF file. And again, also using a variety of printing technologies, because one of the things that when you start looking at labels, packaging, et cetera, it's not just offset. It's offset. It's flexo. It's gravure. Increasingly nowadays, it's inkjet. It's a combination of things. We'll talk a little bit about that later. So there's a lot of different technologies that can come into play that go well beyond what we normally would see in a normal commercial print type of an application. Ultimately, we needed to go beyond just the graphic content itself. We needed to look more at the process than just the design. And that's one of the things that we started working on at the Ghent Workgroup. We started working on how can we begin to segment this work that needs to be done and develop it in parallel, because a lot of this, especially as it relates to dealing with things like developing new extensions to the PDF format or PDFX, or color modeling, et cetera, all of those kinds of things, and color processes, all those kinds of things were supported by other types of organizations and standards groups. So we had to work together towards this common goal, if you will. And we realized that by doing this, though, and actually delineating a lot of this, we could actually go to these other groups and say, hey, look, this is what we need for packaging. Because packaging, interestingly enough, we think about it, it's funny, we think about packaging as just being there. It's package. Doesn't everybody know how to create packaging? But packaging is a very specialized field, interestingly enough. There are not as many converters as there are commercial printers. And as a result, the expertise to be able to even define what's needed was not going to be as easy as it would have been. And that's one of the reasons why we took that on and began to deal with it. So how did we deal with it? Well, we started addressing the different challenges. First of all, the PDF, the basic core PDF, which hadn't been upgraded since 2008, needed a significant update. It needed an update to deal with a number of things. It needed an update to deal with spectral color, going beyond just the CMYK, RGB, et cetera, that we talked about before. We actually worked with X-Rite at the time to help promote the use of CXF in a standardized version to be able to communicate spectral color and let it travel along with the PDF file. And CXF actually supports solid, ink mixing, et cetera. So actually, all of a sudden, we're in a position where we can get more of that rich color information that we needed ultimately to be put into a PDF file. But as I said, a lot of this is fragmented. It's going on, and development is in different areas, ultimately to bring it together, but in different areas. So things have been moving along. CXF is a standard now, and it's actually even being used. As a matter of fact, a lot of these things are being used by vendors, but not in the context of the complete solution that we envisioned when we started the process. ICC Max, which was really kind of the next ICC structure, International Color Consortium structure for dealing with color, which dealt with colors, special colors beyond CMYK in images. So it's not just a matter of you have a package and you need to look at a brand color. Well, what if there's in an image we're not using CMYK, we're using blue, yellow, brown, and red to make up our images. And those colors. Well, it became very difficult to try to support that using the existing ICC technologies and formats and profiles. So they've actually moved beyond that. And in addition, ICC Max supports things like appearance in texture and gloss, because some of those things become a factor. There's CXF data support, so there's some kind of interaction that could happen. And I say could because a lot of this is, we're still building some of the pieces individually that need to ultimately be pulled together. And ultimately pulling it together, as we see it, it would be in PDFX6, which is currently in early stages of development, if you will, with the ISO TC 130 Working Group 2, which ultimately is the group responsible for the blind exchange of printing data. So if we look at some of the things that ICC Max can do, for example, you can see that it actually breaks down much more information other than just a value, CMYK value or an RGB value, and actually allows intent dictionaries with mixing hints and special other special types of data to be able to be pulled together and actually then support some of the requirements for packaging itself. One of the other things that we looked at is that the whole process of getting from design through all the approvals and the fact that packaging is not just by brand, but also by region and in other areas. All of these types of packaging requirements needed to be somehow developed in such a way that it could be passed from the original design and down through into all the other subsequent processes that would go on. And in packaging design, one of the things that is used very regularly is what people would call layers. And for those of you who are involved in packaging, you know that a lot of the tools are kind of the base tool for packaging. Probably one of the most widely used from a design standpoint is Adobe Illustrator, even though this is an InDesign. And interestingly, we'll have more people using InDesign as well now. But the ability to deal with layers as you're creating a design is significant. And if there's a way to take that information and then rather than just submit, for example, for production, one file for English, one file for Spanish, one file for German, one file for Dutch, one file, and go through this whole thing, to be able to kind of consolidate it all and then begin to automate it down the line. Again, a lot of this goes to what can we do to begin to automate processes as we go and move down the line through different stages of production. So we said, okay, well, layers, there's something there that we could probably use. Well, layers, if you get into the technical aspects of the PDF structure, the PDF format itself, layers are really considered optional content. And as PDF developed, this optional content and what you could do with this optional content became much more flexible and available through the applications that are out there, the standardized applications that are out there. And you start thinking about, well, what are some of the things we could do with optional content? Well, how about different roles? How about I'm sending a file, PDF file for approval, and I need to send it to the marketing department, and I needed to send it to the legal department, and I'd go back for design to make sure that the design is the way it's supposed to be, and to production, to the converter to make sure that the die cutting is what we need, and the glue areas are there, and all the things that are required in each of these various stages are required, are available. is there a way to do that without actually trying to give, for example, the legal department all this other stuff that they don't really need to see? Can't we just show them the information they need to see? Can't we just show the converter the information that they need to see? All of this can be done using optional content. So there's as we got into this deeper and deeper, we recognize that there's a lot of value in using optional content for a lot of areas. Obviously, different languages and zones. In the U.S., a lot of packaging is English and Spanish. In Canada, it's English and French. Once you get to Europe, it could be a half a dozen different types of languages or more. And each of those, again, the basic box itself and the imagery may be the same, but the language has to change. So again, by using optional content in those layers as they were created, we can begin to do that and begin to look at automating them through the process as we go down the line. So basically, one of the things that we recognized was that we could communicate information that goes beyond just the content as well, like processing information, embossing, bleeding, creasing, cutting, ink-free areas, legends, varnishes, different dimensions. And again, a lot of this, it's interesting, a lot of this is done kind of ad hoc, depending on who's doing it. They'll create a die cut or a die outline, and depending on who's creating it, they may call it something else. And once you get into an area overseas where the language differences are changing, it could be a die, it could be a cut file, it could be something else, and each of these things could get very confusing and very difficult to begin to automate and standardize down the line. So we actually, one of the first things we did was at the Ghent Workgroup, and the members are really the ones who do a lot of the work on this, and we rely heavily on their expertise. And when we looked at communicating this information beyond just the content, we tried to define what these fields are going to be, what could we call them, and how can they then be used. And this was actually ultimately published through something we called processing steps, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that in a little while. But what's kind of the end game on this? So packaging in particular is changing. It's changing dramatically. A lot of that is because of the introduction of digital print for packaging. But not just digital print. What does that even mean, digital print? Well, there's electrophotographic, there's inkjet. There will still be offset. There'll be flexography. Because Flexo is not the old technology it used to be. Flexo is now becoming a lot more digital. There is still some gravure, but more importantly, we're going to start to see more and more hybrid types of production that allows for a lot more agnostic types of applications that are specialized towards a specific end product or end requirement and need. And so there's going to be a lot of different kinds of variables. And by creating this structure, this digital structure, this standardized digital structure, we're going to be able to support that much more. So what will change and why and when? Well, currently there's an estimation that 3% of packaging is produced digitally. However, inkjet, which is really moving very fast, and this year in particular, you're going to see a lot more inkjet packaging types of products on the market, and different types, not only just inkjet types of products, but inkjet that does other types of, or I should say, ink or dispersion technologies, which is basically using the same concept as inkjet, but dispersing dispersing other types of materials, is going to begin to overtake electrophotography after 2019, and by 2024, inkjet should account for about 56% of the value and 53% of the digital print volume. Now, that's according to a Smithers Pyro report, their future of digital printing to 2024. Whether it's 2024 or it's 2026 or 2023, don't focus on that. That's not the issue. The issue is that it is moving fast, and the changes are beginning to be not just beginning to occur, they will occur, and they will continue to occur at a very rapid rate. In a Printing Industries America report, they say that packaging industry applications in the market are expected to witness the fastest growth at a CAGR of over 12% between 2016 and 2024. So digital print in packaging is moving very fast. And again, if you think back to that first slide I showed you, where we were looking at the introduction of digital print, and I said, you started with a copier, and then it became a digital printer, and then it was a digital production printer. Okay, this is where we are now in packaging. We're at a very similar stage in development. And the things that actually allowed that to happen and drove the increased speed of adoption was the digitization. It was PDF. It was taking a file, a standardized file format, developing an ecosystem of tools and software tools, hardware tools, and processes around that allow it to drive it even faster. And why do we even need it? Why are consumer product companies and brand owners, why are they so hopped up on moving more towards digital production? And by the way, they are. They were very excited, and actually were some of the driving force behind what we were doing at the Ghent Workgroup around packaging, because they really saw the kind of the future, what this could bring to them and allow them to do. And that's targeted campaigns for sure. You see that more and more, whether it's just a campaign and it's a brand product that has a short-term sale process going on, and they have to throw a star on it or some other kind of identifier, short-term shelf life product change. They could do that. They could reduce time to market significantly. Oh, one of the areas we're seeing more and more craft beers, right? Craft beers and craft wines and a lot of craft digital production is allowing a lot of that to happen. Not obviously the digital printing is not what's making the beer, but it's what's making the labels that allow it to go to market and sit on a shelf somewhere, and is helping to drive it. And there's a lot of that going on. So we're going to start to see a lot more campaigns, a lot faster time to market. We're going to get a lot more stable quality, again, because we're going to start dealing with standardization, and standardization brings stability in terms of quality. A lot of operational cost efficiencies, because now, since instead of doing a lot of the production in a very proprietary way, we can do it and justify the building of automated systems to be able to take a lot of the standardization, the standardized files, and take it to the next level of automation. And of course, as I said before, new print and converting equipment and processes. And the changes are going to continue. They will continue to feed off each other, just as they did in commercial print, and as we saw that there. So the PDF format and tools will continue to develop, and they are, and that will drive opportunities for equipment manufacturers to develop new things. This year in particular, we're going to start to see a lot more smart packaging, a lot more integration of printed electronics into packaging. A lot of this is just starting, and will start to expand even further. over the next few years and moving forward. Packaging prepress, as we saw in the other areas, will expand in other areas of process support. We're already starting to see some of the packaging prepress companies starting to take on responsibilities as an arm of the brand and helping them work through the process and working with converters, et cetera. Converters are taking on some of those prepress steps, including digital plate making, where it used to be that a lot of the prepress companies, packaging prepress companies, were making the flexo plates and imaging technology. We're now starting to see the converters taking some of that on, and that's going to continue as well. And it's going to drive new demands for the PDF standards and the software that will allow that all to continue. So where do we stand with a lot of this now? First of all, we've got CXF4, which I had mentioned before, and CXF4 is kind of this XML format or structure that will allow you to carry spectral information, color build information, et cetera. And we're already starting to see that implemented in field in a number of products that are out there. Some of the proofing, the proofing manufacturers are already using that. Some of the packaging prepress software manufacturers are starting to implement it. They're not necessarily implementing it in a standardized way, and that's going to require some additional work and structure, just as it did in commercial print, so that everybody is kind of singing and producing and communicating it in the same way and in the same fashion. So it needs some alignment. Processing steps, which is going beyond content, which we talked about before. That's something that the Ghent Workgroup actually published a number of years ago. I think we published it in either late 2016 or early 2017. We gave it to the ISO, and they are standardizing it, and it's in the final stages of approval, and hopefully that'll be published soon. Although even though it hasn't been published, processing steps is very much a part of a number of the pieces of software that exist in the market today. ICC Max should be published hopefully early 2018. And PDFX6, which kind of in our hopes are, and the goal is that, again, all of these other things will come together and we will be able to align them and publish them as part of, and use them as part of the PDFX6 format, which should be published in 2019. At least that's the goal right now. So how can you participate? How can you get involved in helping us move this along? Well, you can come and join the Ghent Workgroup. Actually, we have manufacturers as part of the Ghent Workgroup. We have converters. We have publishers. We have individual industry members and corporations that are members. We have educational institutions that are members. And again, if you go on our website, you can see some of that. We meet 3 times a year. The next 3 meetings are actually listed right here. You can see we're meeting in Amsterdam in a couple of weeks. We'll be meeting in Kiel, Germany, near Strasbourg. That'll be hosted by Dalim in June. And then in October, we'll be meeting in the U.S. in Washington. Actually, we'll be meeting in in Alexandria, Virginia, but that's right over the river. It would be great if you want to join. If you just want to come in as an observer, you can actually apply for observer status. The information for that is on the website, and you can come and sit in on a meeting and see what we do, see what the process is. How do we get all this work done? And again, get in there on the beginning, on the early stages of developing a lot of this. You could join subcommittees. We have a lot of different subcommittees that focus on packaging or color or process control. There's we have a lot that we're doing, and we're doing it all in parallel. So there's a lot of work that's going on. So you can become a member or not, or just get involved. Ideally, it's always good to become part of a solution. If you can work from the inside and share your experiences and help plan and develop what the industry does going forward, that's a good thing. And you basically, you're part of the solution to create best practices for the market. Stay informed, stay on top of what we're doing. We have all the social media channels in addition to our gwg.org site. So there's a lot of good information there. We publish newsletters. We have tremendous amount of white papers, educational white papers, as well as downloadable test files for testing your workflows, for downloading pre-flight profiles and other types of tools that will allow you to optimize your workflow. This is actually, I believe, I don't know if this is the last of our current series of webinars. You have to go on, but these are the ones that have been done. And you can go to our website, the gwg.org website, and you can actually, if you've missed any of these webinars that we've given so far to date, you can actually access them there. And there's some pretty good. These topics are great. As a matter of fact, the feedback we've gotten on all of them has been exemplary. So if you didn't get a chance to listen to any of these, please jump in and take advantage of it. So that's all I actually have. And if there are any questions, we'll be happy to take them. And if not, thank you very much for attending. And as I said, we will be we're very much available and happy for you to not just ask us questions, but also to participate. So thank you very much, and have a great day.